Hello, everybody. I believe we're live. So welcome. I know we have more people joining. So we're going to get started in just about 2 minutes. But meanwhile, I just want to welcome everybody. And I am going to mute all of you only because sometimes background noise happens and we're not really aware of it, and it can be distracting. But that does not mean that you can't chime in if there's something important that you'd like to add. So I'm just waiting for everybody to jump in. Noise sensitivity is a huge topic, and the proof is so many of you are ready and anxious to learn as much as you can. There's a lot that we have to take into consideration when we have a noise sensitive dog. We have to do a lot of accommodating for them. But research has shown us that there are lots of things that we can do that work. And there are some things that we think will work, but they really don't. So that's part of what I want to cover with all of you today. So I'm just keeping track of people in the waiting room so that I can bring you all in. And as far as questions go, if we have some time at the end, I'll answer some questions. But the time frame for this presentation is going to be about 45 minutes. And if we have time at the end, I'll certainly welcome any questions that you have. But if I don't get to them in the live presentation, put them either in the chat if you're on Zoom, or put them in the comments if you're on Facebook. And I will get to them later on in the day if we don't have time during the live. Okay. So let me just make sure that I'm letting everybody in. I don't want anybody sitting in the waiting room if we don't have to. Okay. So noise sensitive dogs are experiencing a lot of distress. Obviously, that's why you're here. You know that. And their distress overlaps on you, because we don't like to see our dogs suffering. We don't like to see them in distress. We don't like to see them in pain. And so we try to do what we can do. My purpose for today and for tomorrow is to kind of clarify what's going on with the dog when they're experiencing this distress and anxiety based on their response to noise in the environment. It could be thunderstorms, it could be fireworks, it could be a lot of different things. But today I want to kind of clarify, if I can, what's going on with the dogs. Why? Because if we understand how they're feeling, it puts us in a better position to empathize. And when we're empathizing with them, our responses are going to be much more attuned to what they actually need. So that's the goal for today. Okay. When I look over here, I'm letting people in the waiting room. I don't have, an assistant to do that for me. So that's what I'm doing. So I'm not distracted from you all. I'm very attentive to you. So I'm going to start by showing you some slides. And if you feel like you want to jot down some notes, there's nothing complicated on the slides. But if you feel that something really resonates with you and it's something that you want to remember and kind of process after we finish the live today, then by all means jot it down. You have the opportunity to download a workbook, and if you printed it out, you will see that in that workbook there are pages where you can take personal notes on the different points, the 10 steps, the 10 things that you can do right away to help your dog before July 4th, before Independence Day, before the next thunderstorm, before the next event that is noisy. Maybe it's a party that you're going to host, whatever it is. That you can kind of keep track of the things that you want to do to prepare, because preparation is going to make a huge difference. Once the dog is already in a state of anxiety and over threshold, it's really a little too late to start to think about how can I prepare to help this dog. You know, the analogy that I like to use is the time to teach a person how to swim is not when they're drowning. So the preparation part is really key. It's really important. So download your workbook and keep track of the things. And what I'm going to share on the slides are things that you also might want to jot down, things that resonate you that you want to keep track of. And by the way, I also may have to humor my cat in a minute, because right now whenever I start talking to my computer screen, he thinks it includes him. So he may come over here and start bothering me. So I may have to pop him right up on my lap for a few minutes. So let me go over to the slides. And just give me a second. And we will get that done. Okay. Okay, guys. All right. Okay. So if you all can see that screen and see my slides, we're talking about dogs that are sensitive to noise. And it could be noises that we are also kind of sensitive to, but it could be any level of noise. And we have to keep in mind that okay, just move this. That dogs' hearing is far more sensitive than ours. So a sound that may seem, oh, that's kind of loud, to the dog might feel deafening. And they might have a cringing reaction to it. In a normal situation, a dog might just kind of like cringe a little bit, like, oh, that's kind of loud. But a noise sensitive dog becomes the reaction becomes one of anxiety and fear and distress, and it could actually become panic. And you know, I wouldn't wish a panic attack on anybody because it's a horrible thing. But if you've ever had one, you can kind of resonate with what it feels like for a dog when they're in a situation where they're surrounded by something that is very frightening to them. And the key thing is that they can't escape it. They feel trapped. And the need to escape puts them in that fight, flight, or freeze part of their brain. They're looking for ways to escape. So that's why you see dogs that normally would never be able to jump a 6-foot fence will do that and put themselves in harm's way because they're just blindly trying to escape this thing that has them in a state of panic. That's why you have dogs that frantically dig holes in things, like shred sofa cushions, trying to find a way out, jump out of windows, jump off of balconies. That's why it's so important. We'll get to this a little bit later, and it's in that homework workbook that you downloaded. We don't ever want to take anything for granted with a dog. We never want to assume, oh, I have a 30 or 40 pound dog. I have a 6-foot fence. The dog is safe in my backyard. I can put him out there. We don't want to take those things for granted, because when a dog is in this level of distress, nothing is normal. So we can't assume, never assume. Always good advice. All right. So the possible causes for noise anxiety, sometimes it's aging. So, I think about one of my dogs who is departed now. But as he was very, very active throughout most of his life, went lots of places with me, tolerated not tolerated, but just didn't, was unfazed by activity and noise and crowds and all kinds of things. However, as he got older, anytime there was a thunderstorm, he would just go to pieces. He would fall apart. And the one thing that I found helped him, and we'll talk about possible helps a little bit later. The one thing that helped him as he got older was a thunder shirt. It's kind of like swaddling a baby, that kind of deep pressure. That is helpful to people who have sensory integration difficulties. And, sound is a sensory oversensitivity. And so that was the one thing that helped him. And if any of you are using that or thinking about that, it may not be the right thing for every dog, but in this situation, it did help him. Some dogs have a genetic predisposition to be super sensitive to sound. Generally speaking, herding breeds seem to be a little bit more sensitive to sound, probably because what they're genetically predisposed to do, the work they're predisposed to do, they have to be super alert and super aware of what's going on in their environment. So some of them might be predisposed genetically to have this kind of hypersensitivity. Sometimes my dog is barking at the cat. Just ignore him. He'll be fine. Sometimes it's a medical condition. And that's something that obviously you need to have your dog medically evaluated by your veterinarian if you think that that's a possibility. If your dog has had emotional distress, anxiety, or a traumatic experience, that kind of emotional experience can create a lot of sensitivity to things in the environment. So the fact that dogs have more sensitive hearing than we do, the fact that they hear higher frequencies in a normal state will increase when the dogs are in a state of distress, fight, flight, or freeze. So that sensitivity, that distress, increases their sensitivity to touch, to sound, and to light. And the light sensitivity, of course, is related to what happens when there's fireworks. And that's why one of the things that I'm going to recommend when we talk about avoiding exposure for these dogs that are sensitive to sound, we're going to talk about putting in a room where they can't see any of those flashing lights from the fireworks. It's covering windows or whatever, whatever precautions you need to take. We'll talk more about that later on in this presentation. Also sensitive to touch. So that's where something like a thunder shirt or petting or stroking the dog, is that something that the dog is going to be comforted by, or is that something that will increase the dog's stress? That's a determination that you have to make by observing your dogs, and your observation is key. Okay. So let's look at the symptoms. Some of these are pretty obvious. The dog doesn't have to show all of these. A couple of them might stand out over all of the others, but the obvious signs of distress, anxiety, or panic. Dog's heart and respiration rate increases. So that's where you see the dog pacing, showing anxiety, not being able to relax or hold still, moving from place to place, digging in in places where it wouldn't normally dig in order to create a safe place, trying to dig a hole in the couch cushions, for example. Panting, sweating, the dog has tense muscles. You can tell by looking at the dog's face if there's frowning in the forehead. The dog's legs are stiff, just the way the dog's gait is if he's not moving in a relaxed way and those muscles are stiff. Sweating, and dogs sweat from their tongues. So if there's excessive panting and drooling, if the tongue becomes very wide and is hanging out a lot more than it normally would if the dog was just doing ordinary normal panting, that excessively wide tongue is to help the dog relieve that body heat that's coming from increased heart rate and respiration and stress and all of that. They also sweat from the pads of their feet. So if you notice that the dog is leaving wet footprints on the floor, that's because he's sweating because of tension, panting, and of course, trembling. And as I said, you may not see all of those symptoms, but even if you see a collection of some of them, those are signs that the dog needs relief. So how can you help? For people who are sensitive to sound, I can remember going to a family event, this was years ago, and it was a kind of an opportunity to connect with family members, just kind of like a reunion, connecting with people you hadn't seen in a long time, getting caught up, having conversations. But the problem was the people who organized it had the best of intentions because they hired a band. And you can, if you've ever tried to have a conversation with somebody when there's a loud band playing, you know that it just doesn't work. So it was frustrating in the sense that in order to have a conversation, you had to, tap the person on the shoulder you wanted to talk to and take them somewhere else. So it really didn't work. That was an irritation. And it created a certain amount of stress. So on a human level, we have to consider the intentions and the results of those intentions. And what matters is not the intention, but the result. Because we can have the best of intentions and say, I'm going to take my dog out to a concert in the park, and there's a loud band, and the dog is miserable. Your good intentions don't really matter to the dog who is having a miserable time. So we have to always keep in mind what the results or the impact on the dog are going to be of what we decide to do. For people who are sensitive to sound, they generally recommend that you gradually expose yourself to the sound, you think of positive things and, all of that stuff. But we're human and we can do that. We can make a choice. We can make a free choice to do that. We have control, or we need to have control. We have to set ourselves up so that we only expose ourselves to the point where we're in our comfort zone. Maybe we'll stretch it a little bit, but we can always retreat. That's not the case for dogs. When we use things like desensitizing dogs for sound, what we're actually doing with those good intentions I was talking about is exposing them to the thing they're scared of, but the dog doesn't have the ability to control that and stay in his comfort zone because we're making all the decisions about how loud it is, how long it takes, the environment. So for dogs, the very best thing that you can do to help your dog is to take positive steps to avoid exposure to the thing that they're scared of. And you do that by, number one, creating a safe haven. I'm going to come back to that in a second, because that's the main thing that I want to cover with you today, is talking about how to set up that safe haven, what it looks like, things that you have to consider, the kind of preparation that you're going to take. So let me go on and just cover the rest of these first, and then we're going to come back to that. Co-regulation is very important. If you're anxious and stressed, your dog is going to pick up on your energy and he's going to mirror that back to you. So in all of the things that I do, working with people, helping them to support their dogs who have stress or anxiety or reactivity, we talk about the human end of it, which is teaching yourself how to bring that relaxed energy to your dog. And then your dog can co-regulate with you. He can mirror back to you the calm energy you're sending out to him. So co-regulation is very important. Soothing sound is a part of the overall environment that you want to create in the dog's safe haven. Soothing sounds can be anything that the dog finds soothing. It can be your voice, because one of the things you're going to do is make sure that your presence is a part of that comforting environment. It doesn't mean that you have to stay with the dog constantly, but it does mean that you shouldn't just leave the dog alone for long stretches of time without checking in on him to see how he's doing. Soothing sounds can be music, and research has shown that, remember, intentions versus impact or results. Your preference in music is irrelevant. You might like, rock music and heavy metal and all of that stuff, but that's going to make your dog stressed. Research has shown that classical music has the best calming effect on dogs. And if you go to YouTube, there is an abundance of free YouTube videos with calming music for dogs. Just do a search for that. You're going to find tons of it. Calming touch. There are ways to use touch to help your dog. One of the simplest ways that I use is just what we call consent petting or purposeful petting. It's always with the dog's consent, because remember what I said a minute ago, dogs who are hypersensitive to noise may also be hypersensitive to touch. They kind of go together. So you need to find out what your dog's sensitivity is to being touched. If he seeks petting and touching and stroking, then that's something that you can use to support him. But if he doesn't seek it or doesn't consent to it, then that's not a thing that's going to help him. Medication can be very helpful. That is a conversation that you need to have with your veterinarian. From my point of view, from a purely non-medical perspective, if I were thinking in terms of my own personal dogs, if I had a medical opinion that I trusted, and I was told that this particular medication is going to give my dog relief and help him feel better and take away some of his stress and pain, then I wouldn't deprive him of that just because I had my own little maybe questions about using medication. I would have to be a medical opinion that you trusted. That's very important. But that's my opinion. But I'm not giving medical advice because I'm not qualified to do that. Same thing with supplements. You need to do your own research on that. There are over-the-counter supplements that you can get that have a calming effect on dogs. You need to look into that. And if you find something that resonates with you, that you think it would help your dog, then go ahead and give it a try. But remember what I said earlier, you don't teach a person to swim when he's drowning. So these are things that you have to try out in advance. And I know we're close to Independence Day when all of the fireworks is going to happen, but it's still not too late to have that conversation with your veterinarian. And that would be super important. Okay. So on the homework, or the workbook, you can call it homework if you want. The workbook that I gave you, there were 3 sections. In the preparation section, obviously, ID tags, microchips. Your dog you have to have identification on your dog. I mean, that's a no-brainer, right? You have to have a collar that the dog can't slip out of. So not so tight that it's going to choke him, not a choker collar, but just a regular, flat kind of a collar, or a harness, whatever, but something that the dog cannot escape from or slip out of. Medications, have those on hand in advance. After you discuss it with your veterinarian and you make a decision about what you're going to do for your dog, then have those things on hand in advance. Some medications are long-term and take a while to build up in the dog's system, but they last a long time once they're built up. Other medications are designed to be more short-term, so you can give them closer to the time when the dog needs it, but they don't last as long. So that's a decision that you'd have to make. And safe haven, which we're going to get to in just a few minutes. Tomorrow, I'm going to talk about what you need to observe as far as early signs of stress. We'll talk a little bit more about body language, what you can look for in your own dogs, the importance of supervision. The part of safe haven is making sure that your dog has a place to hide, and what to do if your dog hides. And again, intentions versus impact. Your good intentions don't matter if the impact they have on the dog is not to provide relief, but to increase the stress. You don't want to, I know you don't want to do that. So we'll talk about that, and checking often on your dog. And then finally, this last piece is super, super important. Take nothing for granted. Noise sensitivity is not normal. Your dog is not in his normal state. The things he does are not normal. If you have ever been in a state of stress, anxiety, maybe it was because of something you were worried about happening or something that had happened, a bad experience, unfortunately, things like that happen to us. But you're not thinking clearly when those things happen. Most of us do things that we wouldn't normally do if we were in our normal, calm state of mind. The same thing is true with our dogs. So noise sensitivity, this is really key. So listen to this. Noise sensitivity has to be managed because it isn't something you can cure. If it's related to age, unfortunately, there's no cure for old age. If there were one, I hopefully would have found it by now, but there isn't. Medical conditions, those are things that, have to be addressed from a medical point of view. A genetic predisposition, that's part of the dog. So noise sensitivity has to be managed. So that's what I want to talk about now. And just to remind you, tomorrow we're going to talk about what to do for your distressed dogs and what not to do. Again, intentions, results. Okay, so I'm going to stop the share now, and I'm going to talk about, I'm going to talk to you about creating a safe haven for your dog. The key word, of course, is safe, and safe from the dog's point of view. Remember that you can't train a dog to feel safe. The dog has to feel it. It's an emotion. You don't train emotions. you create an environment where the emotions can thrive. And we can teach our dogs how to manage emotions. But your safe haven, number one, it's a place in your house where the dog can go to feel safe and comfortable. It should be a room that has no exterior exits. So you want to write that down. No exterior exits. So something like a mudroom or a laundry room that has a door to the outside. Garage is not a good place. A room in your house. It could be a bedroom. It could be a spare room. It could be an office. It could be, any place where it's sort of away from the main traffic in the house. The windows, you should be able to cover them, keep them closed. Windows should be kept closed and covered. Why? Because you want to block out as much sound as possible. And if there's flashing lights from fireworks or flashing lights from lightning, because dogs learn that the lightning predicts the thunder. I once had a dog that used to bark at thunder. But as she got older, she got deaf. So then she couldn't hear the thunder, but she barked at the lightning because she knew that the lightning predicted the thunder. So you want to, keep windows covered, whether it's drapes or blinds or even putting a temporary cover over the windows. You want to make sure that the dog doesn't see the window as an escape route if they start to panic, because fight or flight means that the dog is going to try to run away. The dog needs to escape. So we want to reduce the things that are triggering that desire to escape. So a quiet room, a doorway that you can either leave open or closed. Closing the door might add to the dog's stress. That's a judgment on your part. You can put a gate across the room to just remind the dog, this is your place, you can stay here, or not. Those kinds of things, that's a judgment. But you want to give the dog a safe place. So what should be in that room? If your dog likes his crate, has been conditioned to his crate, sleeps there, goes in his crate to take a nap, you can put the crate in there. But if you do that, leave the door open, add some extra bedding. Why extra bedding? Because your dog might want to crawl underneath and create like a little cover, crawl under the covers and hide. That would be one place that he can hide. And if your dog hides, whether it's under a bed, in a closet, in a bathroom, if he chooses a hiding place, the best thing you can do is just to leave him there and go in and check on him. And I'll talk about ways you can use your voice in a minute and things that you can say to him, because dogs, if they don't understand our words, they certainly do understand the intentions behind those words, because the words come from thoughts, come from feelings, come from energy, and dogs understand energy. That's what co-regulation is about. So what you say to the dog does matter. Getting to that in a minute. So let the dog hide. You can play, if there's a TV or a radio in that room, you can play it having human voices speaking in a relatively calm way, like a talk show or something like that, but nothing loud and startling, not sudden changes. Because if you're tense and anxious and every muscle in your body is tense, someone comes up behind you and taps you on the shoulder, you're going to jump. So you don't want anything that happens suddenly, even if it's just an ordinary thing, because the dog's startle reflex is on super high alert. So you want to keep everything well modulated. One thing you can use is a noise machine. Those are great. You can put one of those YouTube music videos on at a volume that will kind of muffle outside sounds and outside noises. And you want to go in there and check on your dog repeatedly. If you have a lot of guests on the house, you can put a little sign on the door saying, do not disturb the dog is resting, or something like that, because you need to get the cooperation of of the other people, either in the family or visitors or guests. They need to understand that you've got the dog's situation under control, because good intentions, remember, don't matter. And if a stranger tries to, with the best intentions in the world, to help your dog, but it creates a new level of anxiety, there could be an unfortunate outcome for that. Because when dogs are put in fight or flight, if they don't have the flight option, what are they left with? Fight, which could mean snapping or biting. Or it could mean freeze. And freeze is probably the most stressful and the most dangerous, even though it looks like the dog is quiet, because the dog that's reached that level of stress is shutting down. They're actually leaving their body. Their mind is leaving their body. It's like disassociation for a person. If a person gets hugely stressed, they can kind of disassociate, and you're probably familiar with what that term means. A dog that freezes is almost in that state. So you don't want to let that happen. So just alert strangers, say, understand, that you want to help, but right now the best thing is to just let the dog go. I'm working on something to help the dog feel, just finesse it so that they help you, they work with you. Okay, I haven't paid attention here. Okay, like I have two people in the waiting room. Oh, okay. Okay, there we go. Keep, make sure that you have control over the triggers that are affecting the dog. And sometimes good intentions can end up badly. So as far as offering the dog food, a dog that's stressed sometimes doesn't eat, but if a dog is under threshold, they might enjoy a stuffed Kong toy that you've had in the freezer, because freezing it takes longer for them to work the food out. And it also, if they're a little bit stressed, the frozen Kong will also, licking something frozen helps them cool down a little bit. So you can try that. As far as using your voice is concerned, here's the thing that I want to impress on you. And again, it's back to that conflict between intentions and impact. What we tend to do, because we're human and we want to help, we tend to say to the dog, it's okay, come on, and we try to coax them, come on, it's all right, don't be scared, don't be afraid, and so forth. But think of it this way. I love to ask people to, put yourself in the dog's place. How would I feel if? So here's an example. Let's say you look out the window and you see on the street in front of you ambulances and police cars and flashing lights and crime tape and a lot of people rushing around. You say, oh my goodness, and you start to wonder if you were safe. What's going on out there? And you say to, someone else in the house, look at that, look, oh my gosh, what's going on? And the person says, oh, don't worry, it's probably okay. Is that really going to make you feel better? Probably not, right? You're going to want to find out what's going on. You're going to want to feel safe. You're going to want somebody to explain to you that this is okay, that you are safe, give you a place to go where you're not exposed to all of that. So you need to have exposure limited, and you need to say to the dog, and this is something I'm going to get to tomorrow, I understand you're scared. I'm here. I hear you. I see that you're afraid. Do you need to hide? What do you need? What can I do to help you feel better? And remember, we're limiting exposure. We're avoiding exposure, not coaxing the dog out to experience the thing that he's afraid of. From a human point of view, that might be all well and good because we as humans have consent. We can give our consent. We can control the exposure. The dog can't do that. So we don't want to control that. So that is the safe haven. And when should you prepare that? I would say prepare it now. We're getting close to, and some of you may already be finding that there's fireworks going off in your neighborhood. I know I'm starting to hear it in my neighborhood. Depending on where you live, it's very, very easy to get fireworks. When I lived in New York, of course, you couldn't just buy them anywhere, but there were places that people could go to buy them. Where I live now in the South, they're available everywhere. So you may already be experiencing fireworks going off. So practice, and again, once the dog is already stressed and over threshold, that's not the time to say to him, come on, I've got this nice safe haven prepared for you. You want to get him acclimated to it before. Spend time with the dog in there. Give him, when he's relaxed and calm, give him some of his favorite chew toys. Give him, a Kong, a stuffed Kong to lick and work on. Get him familiar with his safe haven in advance. Have all of your medications on board. If you've discussed it with your veterinarian, if you have medications, make sure everything is up to date. Have phone numbers so that if you have an emergency, you can call the emergency, the veterinary emergency clinic. Just have all of that available. Get your dog acclimated and be prepared. All right. So we have just a few more minutes. If anyone wants to unmute yourself, you can do that and ask me a quick question. Otherwise, we'll end this. The recording of this is going to be in the Facebook group, so you can go back and listen to it. And anyone who's listening to the replay, there's lots of stuff there in the Facebook group that you can download. There are charts of body language. We're going to get into that more tomorrow. There's the workbook for today, which gives you things to talk about. So I think I hear somebody unmuting. Does somebody want to ask a question?
Hi, Marilyn.
Hi.
I'm Joanne from outside Chicago. I do have a question for you. I think I have the answer to this, but dogs that are really scared and thing, they can still feel the vibration of the sounds. Is that correct?
Very likely, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I think having all that extra bedding where they can crawl, and of course that, your question made me think maybe that's why dogs one of the reasons why they like to get themselves buried in a stack of blankets.
Okay.
So, lots of pillows, blankets, give the dog the opportunity to crawl underneath things, bury underneath all the blankets, spread them all out, give the dog different options. If your dog, chooses to go in a closet, for example, stick some extra pillows and blankets in the closet, so we'll have a place to snuggle in. You know, I'm going to talk more about this tomorrow, but there are things like anxiety wraps or thunder shirt, you know, things. If you look up anxiety wrap, if you Google that, you'll find more information about it. But it's the same principle of applying deep pressure to a person who has sensory integration problems. It just helps to center the nervous system. That's why swaddling a baby helps the baby to relax and you know, stop being colicky. So if you know, you can look into that. That I think will help to center the nervous system so that they can tolerate those vibrations. So I think the answer to your question, yes, it would make sense that they could feel them. Did that answer your question?
Yes, absolutely. Thanks, Marilyn.
Okay, you're welcome. We have another minute or so. Anybody else have a question? Anything you want to ask about? If not, you can put your questions in the comments in the Facebook group. Oh, I see that maybe in the chat there's something. Let's see. Okay. Yeah, Dawn. Okay. The only thing I found is that somewhat work to reduce anxiety for my pity girls during a thunderstorm was to wrap, not loose, and not too tight, wrap an ace bandage around their ears. Ah, interesting. You know, you can get earmuffs. And one of the things I'm going to bring up tomorrow also is you can use earplugs, the regular earplugs for people, because a dog's ear canal is L-shaped. So you don't have to be too worried that they're going to get so far in that you know, they'll get stuck or anything. So you can get, you know, earplugs that you would use for a person. Like I used to get those when I flew, because, you know, the ear popping that you sometimes get when you're flying. So yeah, an ace bandage around their ears. Yeah, if they'll tolerate that. And under the neck to reduce the sound volume. Yeah, good idea. They knew, yeah, you would have to get them used to tolerating that. Because for some dogs, that might feel a little weird, and you don't want to do anything that's going to make them more scared. So this is an example of something that I would say definitely prepare the dogs ahead of time, gradually get them used to it. My deduction is that dogs come a primal world relating to existence and survival. So during primal times to humans, when they didn't understand physical environmental happenings, even humans had all kinds of fear. Oh, sure. If we don't know what's going on, that fear of the unknown. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Okay. Yes. You're more than welcome. Joanne and Sarah, more than welcome. I give my dog gabapentin for fireworks, knocks her out, and she sleeps through the fireworks. Works for some dogs and not. Yeah, it's true. Medication, touch base with your veterinarian on the medication. And again, the only advice I can give you is that if I had a trusted medical opinion concerning one of my dogs, I would follow that trusted medical advice. And I wouldn't substitute my judgment for a medical judgment. Okay, so that's my advice, but talk to your veterinarian. You're welcome, Lizette. So nice to see you here. Okay, guys, you know, I said 45 minutes. I came close, just, you know, just a tiny bit over time. So awesome. The replay is in here. Now, after this event is over with, I'm going to send out the links for tomorrow's event. If I send two events at the same time, people are going to get confused, like, oh, which is which. Happens, right? So you can look for that. I'll post it in the Facebook group. I'll also send an email with the Facebook link and the Zoom link. And I will check in the Facebook group. If there's any questions, I will answer them later today. All right. I have a couple of meetings coming up now, so it won't be till later on. So don't think I forgot you. Okay, guys. All right. Awesome. You are awesome, all of you. Thank you so much for attending. And I'll see y'all tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Marilyn.